Radiocarbon dating can only date the material that a manuscript is written on, like the skin of the animal, but not the writing itself, meaning the ink. And even that, the dating of the skin, can be very inaccurate. Can it really be trusted to date early Quranic manuscripts? Come and see. Today, we are going to continue the discussion with something that we finished our last episode on, which is the carbon dating. With me here in studio, of course, to unpack all of that for us, our dear brother, Dr. Jay Smith. Dr. Jay, thank you so much, as always, for all of your contribution and all of your amazing work, and for really taking the time with me to analyze this, in my humble view, great, really, publication by a scholar. At least for once, we are starting to see some actual academic work that have some collaborating evidence of what we've been talking about concerning the origin of the Quran and Islam in general.
Yeah, and this is the difficulty that we're having, and that is, how do you date manuscripts? Everybody wants manuscripts dated. They want to know, is it the Noldeki Shwali paradigm, which suggests that the Quran was created with Uthman, and that's the Islamic narrative, the standard Islamic narrative, always started from that premise. Noldeki and Shwali were the ones that really pushed that. Or is it the new paradigm, the new category that Shoemaker is really standing behind in his book? Is it that the Quran comes really from Abdul Malik and Al-Hajjaj, which would be beginning of the 8th century? So we're arguing from those two different premises. On one hand, you have 652 Uthmanic narrative, and the other one you have 705 8th century narrative.
Right.
We're going for the 8th century narrative, and that's what Shoemaker is pushing. And so obviously the dating is very important. These are the dates we're talking about. Radiocarbon comes into play, and that's what we ended with. We wanted to talk about radiocarbon dating, but how accurate is it?
Can you tell our audience, what do we mean by radiocarbon?
Well, it's looking at the breakdown of the carbon when the animal dies. Now, what do I mean? These are goats, these are sheep, these are deer. These manuscripts are no longer written, they don't need to be written on papyrus like our biblical manuscripts, the New Testament Greek manuscripts. Papyri are those interlocking leaves that made out of papyrus tree, the plant, which disintegrates after about 100 years. They're leaves, and so they get dry and they crinkle. Skins don't, but that's why manuscripts such as parchment or vellum are made out of these animal skins. The difficulty is animal skins cost an awful lot of money, because you've got to not only cure the skin, then you've got to scrape off the hair and all the rest, and it takes an awful lot of time. Only very wealthy people can use parchment or vellum. So someone like a caliph would have access to this kind of material. Someone like a king or an emperor, Constantine, for the biblical manuscripts. That's why you get the Greek manuscripts, the Sinaiticus, possibly the Vaticanus, or possibly 2 of the 50 that he commissioned for the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century. Why? Because he was wealthy. So you can only have a wealthy person, because one manuscript may take up to 50 to 55 different goats or deer. So we're talking about the breakdown of the parchment of the deer skin. We're not talking about the ink.
Exactly. I was going to say, you're dating the skin, but not the ink, which means, Dr. J, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can date the skin, and the skin could be old, but the ink could be much newer.
Always the skin comes before the ink. Right. People tend to forget that. And what tends to happen is you have large collections of these skins, and they're kept mostly in monasteries. So these are mostly our Christian manuscripts. The Muslims really weren't into this. They hadn't really, remember, the script in the 7th century, the Arabic script, as we're going to find out, the Arabic script was very crude. They didn't have Arabic scripts. When Abdul Malik came to power, they didn't have a lot of people that wrote things, because you only had 16 letters at that time. They didn't even have the dots or the vowels, that the five dots or the 3 vowels that then came into play in the 8th century. So there would be no reason to write large manuscripts. And because of that, almost all of the manuscripts in the 7th century were housed in monasteries mostly for monks to write biblical texts or to write liturgy or to write lectionaries or to write hymns. And those would all been done in Aramaic, which was well used. Aramaic was used, and so we have lots of manuscripts from 4th, 5th, 6th, up until the 7th century. We have St. Ephraim's poems that are written from the 4th century. Those are on manuscripts. But now we're in the 7th century. Now we're no longer in the Byzantine world where the manuscripts are being used. We're away over in the East, and we're in what is today would be called Syria or Jordan or Lebanon. Or Iraq further to the east. So those are the countries, and no one's even suggesting that this is down in the Hijaz. We're not talking about Central Arabia. There was nothing down there. As we're going to see in subsequent videos, there is nobody down that far that even writes. They're not even literate down there. So we're talking about the north, and we're talking about cities because that's where the literate people would be. And the literate people at that time all would have read Aramaic or Greek or Hebrew, but not Arabic. Arabic was yet to be written down. So that's why there's no manuscripts written in Arabic. That's why we're going to see it makes no sense for someone called Uthman way down in Medina writing huge manuscripts. There are these cities as we're going to see later on, these cities like Yathrib only had about 100 to 200 people living in them, and no Jews or no Christians that far south. So no manuscripts. So we're talking way up north. We're talking Damascus, really what we're talking about. And that's exactly where Abd al-Malik lived. He was the caliph there in Damascus. And he is the one that is commissioning these manuscripts. Where is he going to get the parchment from? Not from other Arab sources, because there had been no reason. Up to this time, there really had been no reason to write large manuscripts. So he's going to have to get them from the Christians. And the Christians have these in their monasteries in places like Damascus, in places like Petra, in places like Jerusalem, in places like Ctesiphon, which later became what is today known as Baghdad. These are the big metropolises where these treasure troves of parchment would lay. And sometimes those parchments have been there for decades. They could even be there for 100 years. However, nothing's written on them because they're clean, and they keep them in boxes so that they keep them from rats and from anything eating them, or gnats, or any types of bugs. Now, here is the difficulty. If you're going to date them using radiocarbon dating, that's only dates the deterioration of the skin itself.
Of the animal, yeah.
Of the
animal skin. Yeah.
Whether it's deer, whether it's goat, whether it's sheep. People don't realize that. And they see the manuscript and they say, aha, this is the date because we know this is when the radiocarbon dating. Even the radiocarbon dating, as we're going to see, it's very inexact. In the 7th century, they're giving you about 100-year span. So what I would like to do is just look at one example. And what we can do is actually go to that example, because what Shoemaker is doing, he actually gives an example of one scholar. His name is Van Putten, or Van Putten. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
I think it's Van Putten. We want to do a teaser now because we're almost out of time. And then when we come back in the next one, we unpack more in depth. But
because
give a teaser.
He actually does believe in the adequacy or the efficacy of radiocarbon dating. And he goes and makes a fallacy here. But what fallacy does he make? We're going to show you the fallacy he makes. But I'm going to let Shoemaker talk, because Shoemaker explains it much better than I could explain it.
Wonderful. So, for the sake of our viewers here, what we're talking about is the dating of any manuscript, really, for that matter, but specifically the dating of Quranic manuscripts. And what Dr. J was saying is that even when you take those dates seriously, you still have about a century of range. At least you will see now in
Well, let me just give you real quickly
future episodes that the range is even larger sometimes.
Look at the Birmingham Folio. We already did the Birmingham Folio. Remember the dates we got? 568 to 645. 568. That's almost 80 years distance. And of course, most people went with the 645. You're supposed to take the median between those two. It'll be around 610. Really is probably the best part of the date if you're going to use such a large span.
Why wouldn't they take the median? Because it can create problem when you try to line up the traditional Islamic dates.
Because 610 is about the time that Muhammad's just receiving his revelation.
Right.
You can't have that as a date. But again, what is the problem with that? That is the date of the starting of the deterioration of the animal skin, not the writing, not the pink. Now, let me say one thing before we go.
Sure.
The reason why you don't date the ink is this.
I was just going to say that. Go ahead.
Is the pigment. In order to make ink, you get a bit of pigment here, you get a bit of pigment here, you get from different berries from all over the world, and then you melange them, you mix them up. Once you mix them up, there's no way you can date it because of the fact that they come from all over the world from many different time periods and many different geographical because it's geographical locations, it's impossible to date them. That's why you don't date the ink.
But there is a different way to try to date the writing, the calligraphy.
Yeah. The style of writing,
exactly.
That's what you're talking about. Orthography, that's why De Roche, we're going to see François De Roche comes against what Van Buiten's saying because of that very problem.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And hopefully everybody is tracking with us now. So even if you try to do your best to date a manuscript, you're still dating the skin, not the ink. And that's a big difference because the skin could be 100 years old, and they rewrote on it like we have a palimpsest example sometimes. You wipe it off and you write on it again. Or the skin of the animal is dated one date, and the ink, if we are successful in the future to find a way to date it, would have been written at a later time. So don't basically celebrate and get excited over the date of a manuscript because you're celebrating basically the date of the animal skin itself, not the writing as we know it. Thank you, Dr. J. So when we come back, I assume we are going to now show what Shoemaker is saying about this, and maybe he's
going to use Van Buiten as an example.
As an example, exactly. And we will see even what De Roche is saying about the process itself. Again, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Until next episode, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, CIRA International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.